You're listening to Hardscape Growth, a podcast for hungry professionals who want to grow their businesses and level up. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hardscape Growth Show. I'm your host, Alex from TechnoBlock, and we are back from our little summertime break. Very excited to be hosting this week's episode because it's no secret the market has really shifted dramatically this year. It's slowed down a lot. It's pretty rough out there when you talk to a lot of contractors. And, you know, when we look at the theme of this season with the Hardscape High Five, take care of your people, know your numbers, build a strong brand, add value, and keep learning. That third one is one that we haven't really expanded on very much yet. And that's why I'm so excited, because we have a real expert to talk to us about it today. His name is Dan Antonelli. He's the founder of Kickcharge Creative, which is an agency that specializes in branding for home service companies. He's also the author of not one, but two books. The latest one, and the one of which we're going to pull some little nuggets of wisdom out of, is Branded, Not Blanded. I have a copy here. I was reading it earlier this summer, and I've read a lot of books on building a business, and sometimes they're pretty dry, but I got to tell you, Dan, this is one that's a lot more fun to read because it's written in a really friendly and familiar voice, and there's lots of jokes and sarcastic comments in there, and it's right up my alley anyway. So I enjoyed reading it, and I want to thank you for joining us on the show. Welcome, Dan.
Oh, Alex, thanks so much for having me on. It's I really appreciate that feedback actually too, because I think I share that same feeling on reading some of these other books, and they're a lot of big words and very dry, as you note. And I really wrote this with the mindset of speaking to someone as if we were over having a drink together and just talking it through. I don't want to try to put in a lot of big words and scary words. I just really wanted to distill it and make it as simple to understand and follow and make it fun to read. So I'm glad. I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, it was definitely a fun read. And, I think you say this on the back of the book, but I think what I like about it is it not only is it full of great examples and lots of pictures, and, you're a creative agency building these brands. So, you have examples of what that looks like executed on vehicle wraps and billboards and even vinyl wraps for inside offices like you have in your office there. But also, it's pretty much a blueprint for building the brand. There's a lot of step-by-step components here. Like, this is where you start. This is what good looks like. This is what bad looks like. And I guess that comes from your experience with this business, but also with other businesses that you've started in the past too. Just before starting the recording here, we were talking about a couple other businesses that you've been involved in earlier in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of ironically, many years ago when I first started within the industry, I was doing a ton of lettering for primarily landscape companies. I don't know what it is about New Jersey, but they seem to have more landscapers per capita than any other state in the nation.
It's the Garden State, man.
So I did a lot of, originally starting out doing the logo and then integrating the logo on their trucks. And then I would do their brochures and their websites and their marketing materials. I even had like kind of a separate division called landscaper marketing. And that was in the .com phase. So it was landscapermarketing.com. And we kind of specialized in doing a lot of work for the green industry. And over the years, we pivoted, to still do and service that industry and really have done a bit more in the trades for plumbing, heating, electric, and those types of businesses as well. But we still work with a lot of home service companies that are in the green industry as well.
So in your opinion, what's the main difference between a brand or branding and marketing? Because they're related, they're like cousins, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah, they're absolutely related. The big thing that you see people sort of getting wrong is they do a lot of marketing without really having a brand, right? So that kind of sounds a little strange. Well, how can you possibly do that? Well, having that foundation is really the core of what we talk about in the book. So if you imagine that your marketing is and even the integration of your marketing is kind of like a wheel. And in the center of that wheel, you start out with the logo, and then the spokes comprising that wheel would be the channels that you use in your marketing. So your social social media, your billboards, your truck wraps, uniforms, brochures, website, voice, all those things comprise that brand. And then those are the marketing, um, you know, marketing mediums that we use to talk about our brand, right? So if you don't get that hub designed correctly, then that wheel, that marketing wheel, is not really round, right? So if it's not round, well, what does that mean for you as a business owner? Essentially, it translates into meaning that you need to spend more money than on your marketing because that wheel is not operating efficiently, right? So that's really the most critical aspect. And so you see a lot of people kind of get it wrong because they don't invest in building that brand first, and then they wonder why either they need to spend so much money on marketing or why the marketing isn't working. So we really want, at the end of the day, we want our clients, and the point of the book too is just to try to teach people how investing in the branding in the beginning will actually mean that they'll need to spend less and less money on marketing, because if the brand is doing its job, if it's disruptive, if it's delivering promise, if it's sticky in that consumer's mind, well, then I don't need to rely so much on Google to deliver my next lead. I can use other sources, more grassroots sources, and those sources tend to cost significantly less than those other sources, especially online in comparison to digital.
So you opened the book with a great story about Gettle air conditioning and plumbing, and it's a pretty powerful story. For people who haven't read the book, you want to give us a Cole's Notes, because I think it's a perfect example of how a brand can have such a profound impact on so many aspects of your business, not just the success of your marketing, but really it becomes almost the heart and soul of the company sometimes.
Yeah, and so much of that particular brand translates so deep into culture, translates so deeply into their story and their why, right? So, you look at a lot of companies trying to really figure out what their why is, what is their objective is, and do all the employees on the team even understand that why? But for Gettle, I mean, that was a $6 or $7 million company when it was acquired. They were in Las Vegas. The company was losing money. It was not doing well, had really bad reputation, and it was purchased by, to me, a genius. His name is Ken Goodrich. And he worked with us to develop this idea, this notion, this story. And he also worked with an ad agency and a guy named Roy Williams has written a number of books also, which are really great books to read. He's from a company called The Wizard of Ads. But basically the story of Ken and him holding a flashlight for his dad when he was younger, as an HVAC. His dad was an HVAC technician, and he would work with his dad and help his dad, and he would hold the flashlight. And so we thought, wouldn't it be nice to sort of wrap the branding around that story, okay, and how he grew up in the trades. And so the branding that we created, it features a more nostalgic looking brand. It features a boy holding the flashlight. The boy actually wound up being based off the likeness of Ken's own son, actually. So it was kind of interesting that we had that personal connection of integrating his son into the actual branding. And in that company, I think it was about 10 years ago that we did the branding for that particular company, and they've gone from 8 million in revenue to, I think it's 300 or 400 million in revenue at this point. So I think it's actually the largest HVAC company in the country, if I'm not mistaken. People see that boy and they connect with that messaging. And so that has permeated not only in the advertising that they put out, but also from a cultural perspective, which is what we spoke about earlier.
Mm-hmm. And at 400 million, I'm sure they're definitely up there. If they're not the largest, they're definitely in the top.
Yeah.
That also means that they have, you're talking about that permeating of the brand into the culture. When you're doing those kinds of volumes, that means that you have vehicles and employees just traipsing all over God's green earth.
Right.
And your visibility just continues to skyrocket from there, right?
100%. Yeah. And they don't have the same recruitment problems that most home service companies have, because it looks like a place that they want to be a part of. They understand the story. They understand the vision. of what it means to be a Gettle employee and the standards that they're expected to live up to. So you walk into his space. He's got a beautiful facility in Vegas with these, again, beautifully branded wall wraps, and you walk into that place and you're in a space that is unlike most other HVAC companies at that point. So people forget the relationship of brand and recruitment, and a lot of people don't pay enough attention to how they're perceived, not only to the customer that they're trying to sell to, but the employees that they're trying to attract. So you always want to keep in mind, you hear a lot of owners that sort of, lament at the fact that they can't find qualified people to work for them. And then you look at the branding and you sort of can sympathize with them and understand why no one wants to work there, because it doesn't really look like a place that I want to work for. It doesn't really look like a place I'm going to be proud to wear the uniform or drive a branded truck. So those really do play a role as well. And sometimes you have to, as an owner, you have to be very introspective to look at your current branding and say, does this even represent who we are today? I know in the hardscape world, when you think about the beautiful patios that are created and the beautiful outdoor environments that are created, and then sometimes you look at the truck that's on the driveway that's doing that work, and you make a lot of judgments on that truck and you say, they don't look like they're doing like an amazing job. And then maybe you walk in the backyard and you're blown away. But wouldn't it be nice if they looked at the truck, or the neighbor looked at the truck, and right away they thought, oh my God, they must be getting something really nice. So the perception of that brand, goes such a long way in establishing in that consumer's mind what type of job they think they're going to get. So what if we could control the way Mrs. Jones felt about your company before you even got the opportunity to go on that sales call? What if I could have her believe that you guys would build an amazing, outdoor living space for her that would just be epic? And she's not going to be as concerned about you being X dollars per square foot in comparison to the other two estimates she got at, slightly less square foot, right? So how do we build value into that discussion? How do we make her feel like, well, you know what? This company is the most expensive, but look at the level and detail and craftsmanship they put into the product, and having her feel like there's a reason. So you look at even the challenge of average tickets, right? So how do you increase your average ticket? Well, one thing you can do is just make sure you look like a brand that's delivering something of value in comparison to someone else. So in the hardscape world, I look at that world, and to me, that's a world that's just ripe for opportunity, because there aren't a lot of hardscape contractors that are really investing in branding and understanding the relevance and the significance of how it factors into how much money they can charge. Like, there's a direct relationship with how much money you can charge with how you look. I hate to say, because it sounds painfully obvious, but like, you show up looking, ripped jeans and dirty clothes. Like, she's not thinking that you're a premium home service contractor that's going to build an amazing outdoor living space, right? But, seeing your van or your truck parked on your neighbor's driveway in a beautiful site sign, and then she hits the website, then she sees how the branding is integrated on the website, she looks at the reviews, all those touch points again are factoring into her perception of your particular company. And the other thing too that goes along with that is the idea of, how do you build a brand that is memorable for her, so that actually she's not ready to do this backyard next year, but that's the project she has on her mind for next summer, let's just say. Mm-hmm. So how do we make it so she remembers your actual name next year, instead of going on Google and just typing in, hardscape contractors near me?
Right.
So that's a big piece of what we talk about too in the book, for sure.
So you touched on it a little bit with the vehicles. I think now's a good opportunity to talk about those vehicle wraps, because I think, you're saying that the hardscape industry is one that's probably ripe for the picking, because so few business owners are prioritizing investing in brand, or have really thought about how to create a strong brand for their business before investing. And ironically, that it's an industry that has probably one of the easiest ways to get your brand out there because of the sheer volume of trucks and trailers and equipment that need to be mobilized every day of the week.
Yeah.
Especially if you have multiple crews, you're plopping billboards exactly in the neighborhoods where you want to do business.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the things that you see that are done correctly versus done incorrectly? And maybe let's start with like the bad examples that you see, that we all see all too often in terms of vehicle wraps or identification on vehicles.
Yeah. I mean, in the hardscape world, one of the things that we're not believers in is photography on truck wraps, right? So you see
not believers in.
Yeah, you see a lot of landscape companies that want to put photos of, let's just say for argument's sake, brick pavers, right? So they want to put this beautiful brick paver backyard picture on the side of their truck. Mm-hmm. So while that may communicate what it is that this company does, what it typically does is it comes at the expense of their own brand, right? So huge photo of patio, right, of the patio, and then the name is marginalized because so much real estate is devoted to that particular photo. So for us, I'd rather devote real estate to your brand. I'd rather make your brand as large and as visible as possible. And if it's branded correctly, I don't need a photo of a hardscape to have people understand what it is you can do. You have to remember too that photographs aren't representations of brands. They're only representations of what you actually do, not who is actually doing it, right? So that's one of the reasons, like it's the same thing in the HVAC space, why I won't put a condenser unit on the side of a van. Because while that may signify to that homeowner that this company does air conditioning, assuming that Mrs. Jones even knows what that square box is, okay? And sometimes they don't, right? But assuming she does. So you devote all this real estate to this beautiful condenser unit. You've got the blue sky and the green grass. Who's the name of the company? Oh, well, like that's really small and it got marginalized because I'm putting this large photograph. So we're not real big on that. Again, you try to think about branding, you try to think about brand colors. If I'm devoting all this real estate to photography, then I can't even actually own the brand colors because I don't have the opportunity to integrate the brand colors in a very dominant and, memorable fashion. So, listen, we I know a lot of companies use photography on their truck wraps.
Yep.
It's just not something that we've seen to work well. And again, a lot of times it's very difficult to even have things be legible when you use photography. When you put words on top of a photo, now you have to use glows and outlines and the whole thing just starts becoming really, really messy. So not a big fan of doing that. And again, a lot of the challenge sometimes in doing an effective truck wrap or trailer wrap is the fact that the branding itself was never designed or intended to function well in that particular environment. Mm-hmm. So you will never design an effective truck wrap with poor branding, right? So that's why, like for us, we start with the brand, obviously, and then we do the truck wrap. And a lot of times, people come to us and they want us to work with their existing brand, and there's no way that I can build an effective truck wrap with their current branding. And, we'll talk about the deficiencies, talk about why that actually won't work. But that's why it's so important. Again, going back to that brand wheel and that marketing wheel is to get that foundation correctly, because otherwise the other stuff is just never going to be optimized. It's never going to be as able to deliver the ROI that a better brand would.
This episode is brought to you by Hardscaper.com. The Hardscaper mission is to empower industry professionals with the skills, inspiration, and confidence they need to take their businesses to new heights. Struggling with training programs for your team? Looking for helpful tips to build a better company? Subscribe today to gain access to hours of interactive on-demand hardscape construction and business courses for free. Check out hardscaper.com. So what does the good branding look like then? If you're not going to go with a big picture, and I totally understand what you're saying, especially that, one of the keys to, or at least what we're seeing, is the more successful hardscape companies out there are doing some funkier designs. They're mixing in different colors and decorative banding and different textures. So it can get pretty busy, especially considering you have to probably crop that picture to make it fit on the vehicle properly.
Yeah.
So you end up being really close on probably a pretty busy section of the job, because that's where it has all the detail. And that's what you're trying to project, because you're really good at design. You're really good at executing those details. But that's not what's coming across, because it just looks like a cluttered thing. So
Right.
is it better? I mean, you said colors, you said, prioritize the name, make sure that the logo is appropriate or designed to be used in those applications.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand a little bit more on that in
Sure.
terms of like practical advice? I'm sitting here, I'm looking at my truck and trailer that I just wrapped last year, saying like, oh shit, I just put a big picture on it. What do I do now?
So think about the concept of disruption, right? And that's really the theme that goes throughout the book, branded, not blanded. So you think about blanding, which essentially means fitting in, right? Not standing out. So if you go on Google right now, or you go on, a clip art site and you type in landscape logos, you're going to see a whole bunch of stuff that looks exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the thought again behind the idea of disruption is doing something that feels fundamentally different than what all your competitors are doing. So if you were to put your logo on a screen and you want to look at your top 5 competitors and look at their branding, and if there isn't one of them that really stands out as being unique or distinct, then how do you think Mrs. Jones is going to distinguish your brand among those? So the first step is really to think about how do I develop a brand that feels ownable and unique and different than what everyone else is doing. So even colors are so important in figuring out how do we develop colors that only we own. So I hate to state the painfully obvious, but like greens in the landscape industry are very difficult to own because everybody is using green. So what about if yours was, orange and apple green instead of hunter green, let's just say for argument's sake, or something like that. So thinking about it from that perspective and trying to think about colors that only people would associate with my company, right? So that's why it's really important if you're ever rebranding to make basically a mood board that has all your competitors on screen, has pictures of their truck wraps, what the guys that they employ, their uniforms look like, and try to say, okay, if every one of these guys is a derivative of apple green, well, then I can't be green also, because there's no chance that Mrs. Jones is ever going to distinguish my brand among theirs, right? So you really, again, just trying to think about disruption in terms of colors and owning colors. So maybe it's purple, right? Maybe it's purple. Maybe it's purple and orange. Whatever the case may be, that's going to be decided basically based on the competitive analysis of that particular market, which is how we do branding. Like we look at what is happening in that market, and then we say, here's the opportunities of doing something different, right? So this is why we're recommending these colors. And then you think about, well, what are the other things that are common on that Google search? Well, you got a picture of a tree. You got a picture of a house. You got maybe a shovel, so you've got all these very, very common symbols that are associated very specifically with landscaping or landscape contractors. How do we think about a way that we can own that? So I think about a brand that we created for a company called Oasis, and it's Oasis Turf, and we have a toucan. And the color scheme that we derived from there is very unique, very colorful. And then the tagline that we wrote for them is, "We're wild about lawns." So you have this visual of this very large bird, right? You've got this lettering Oasis, a very easy name to remember. And then you've got this tagline. And now everything connected, the whole story is being told about what's different. "We're wild about lawns" already tells me something unique and compelling about this particular company, and it's very memorable. Like if you Google it, you'll see it, and like it's a pretty unique approach to a lawn and landscape company.
And I think we underwent a rebranding a few years ago, 2019, and definitely going through that process firsthand and really mapping out all your competitors on the screen, looking at them. And looking at, we were at the point where we were looking at not just the brand logos, but also, what do their catalogs look like? What do their websites look like? What do their messages look like? What are every aspect of what we're competing with, the touch points, all the ways that the customer could interact with us, and then figuring out, okay, why are we different and how do we communicate that?
Mm-hmm.
What clearly says what makes us us versus the other guys? And I think that's something that, you just described as being the key. And if you're not doing that first, we go back a few minutes, we were talking about that why do we exist? And then what makes us different? Why would somebody choose us over somebody else? And it can't be generic things. It can't be like, well, like we show up to work on time, or, like we deliver. Like it needs to be things that actually trigger some kind of emotion or reaction or some kind of real response from people. Because if it's too generic, you can't differentiate. You all look the same. So I think there's some really good stuff in what you just said. And I think the last thing I want to touch on from that example with Oasis is, there isn't a lawn on the truck.
Yep.
Right? It's a toucan and a slogan. And the slogan says, we're wild about lawns, or something like that. I don't remember exactly what you said, but it says what you do. Yeah. But there's a little play on words. There's a memorable character. There's something that stands out. It makes it easier. And, sometimes you may not even remember the name, but at least you remember the one with the toucan. So then when you're searching, even if I'm searching for landscape contractors near me on Google, I'm scrolling and I'm looking for the one with the toucan. That's the one I want to hire.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking about this other brand too that we did for a hardscape contractor out in California. The name of the company is Stepping Stone, and I think their URL is steppingstonelandscape.com. But if you look at the colors on that particular brand, and I'm looking at it now on my screen, and it's brown, it's orange, it's ivory, and it's light teal, right? And you say, like, those colors don't even make any sense really being put together. But if you look at the actual truck and the brand, it is so distinct, it is so memorable, and there isn't anything at all in the market that shares probably any of those colors. And so we created that brand again, as something to illustrate obviously the premium service that they provide. It's a very, very clean looking brand that we created. And the truck wrap is just so distinct and so different than what everyone else is used to seeing. So this rolls up to Mrs. Jones, to her house, and you step out of this truck and you're already imagining that this is going to be a really, really premium provider of building my dream outdoor landscape, so again, like, that color aspect is so important to try to think about colors in a way that feels unique and ownable. And if I had described this probably to the client and said, hey, we're going to do brown and sort of this light ivory and teal and orange, like, it sounds awful. Like, it sounds like it makes no sense. But when you put it together, it really, again, just owning that particular color scheme. It's the same reason why in the HVAC space, I don't want to do red and blue, because I can't own red and blue. There's no way I could put a brand out there, and every time you see red and blue, you immediately think of that one company. I mean, outside of the Americana aspect of thinking of the American flag and things like that, it's also a color scheme that, every other HVAC contractor in the market is using. Cold,
yeah.
So, the colors is a really, really critical thing to consider as you're thinking about branding your business.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the practical impacts of the brand. Like, obviously we talked about standing out in the minds of prospective clients, but how does a strong brand, I guess we'll retake your example from the book, the hub, how does that really impact the spoke in a practical sense? Like, conceptually, I get it, strong brand, then, my radio ads, will they make sense? My billboard ads, my truck wraps, they all make sense. But what does that look like in terms of results? Because I got to invest in a brand. So how does this help me down the line?
Right. So the one thing that we try to do is really assess the data, right? So in as much as we love making pretty things and pretty brands and pretty wraps and integrating in all these channels, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is, does it work and what's the ROI on it? So we spend a lot of time looking at data to really determine how well these approaches are actually working. So the biggest thing that you can think about is the idea of becoming sticky is a huge piece of it, because if I can get into the consumer's mind your brand name, when they need service, think about how much easier it is for you to rank higher for your company name rather than, again, landscape contractors near me. Because now when you do landscape contractors near me, you're paying Google for that lead, okay? And you're competing against everyone else that wants that particular keyword. But what if they typed in your name right away? Now you're not really competing with anyone, especially if you have a well-branded name, like a unique name that they remember. So we looked at results of companies that have invested in the branding, that have strong naming, and we compared them to companies that didn't, right? In terms of how many inbound leads were they getting through their website? How many conversions is the website bringing in on a well-branded company versus a poorly branded company? And like the numbers are crazy. Like we did these assessments on the HVAC space, and generally what we were seeing in terms of branded keyword searches for an HVAC company, and we basically had 25 examples of companies we did the branding for versus 25 we didn't do the branding for. And it was almost like a 10x return in terms of the number of branded keyword searches per month. It was about 450 versus 45 for a company that we didn't handle the branding for. So what does that say? What does that translate into? It just means that, again, that stickiness of the brand within the community. And you mentioned it early, Alex. You said, think about the opportunity that these guys have, because every day they're in the neighborhood, right? They're in that neighborhood. They've got an 18-foot enclosed trailer. I mean, Jesus, it's like a huge billboard, right? So the idea of being sticky in their mind really is demonstrated by just the inbound traffic that's coming to the website for branded keyword searches. And then even just the conversion rates on a branded site versus a sort of an unbranded site, it's double. So it was like 12% on a branded versus 6% unbranded. So if you want to look at the 450 inbound leads that came in and the conversion rate on that, you're talking about 53 leads versus like 4 leads a month. So like, it's not just the investment one time, it's just how this continues to play out. So if I can lower your marketing spend by getting your name sticky in that consumer's mind, that's ultimately the goal. You'll be less dependent on Google. I mean, Google loves unbranded companies. Like that's their ideal company, because they don't want to deliver organic results for free. They want everyone to pay for the results, right? So if you start typing in the name of that particular company, you're essentially bypassing, needing to pay for that particular lead. Of course, listen, everyone's going to need to still continue to pay for PPC and LSA. I'm not suggesting that that's going to disappear, but the ROI on a branded company is going to obviously way outperform an unbranded company. And that goes across all the channels. It'll make the billboard more effective. It'll make the print ad more effective. It'll make the radio work better because they start connecting all these different pieces that they're seeing in that wheel.
I think what's especially compelling about the data you just shared is you did that in the HVAC space, which is different from the hardscape space. However, the HVAC space is very much, in my opinion at least, one that is responding to a need. Like, oh, no, my air conditioner's broken. Google, who's out there, make some phone calls. Whoever picks up the phone and gives me a decent quote, they're the one that's showing up at my house tomorrow or whenever they can show up. So to have them be searching by name when it's something that they need and it's like, it just happened. And it's not something that I'm saving up for and I'm dreaming about and I'm on Pinterest, I'm pinning different things and I'm building this mood board and this wish list. No, like this is like, oh shit, something broke, gotta fix it. Who's that guy again? Oh yeah, the kid with the flashlight. What's that one? Gettle. Boom. Like that is impactful stuff. Yeah. And I can only imagine what the same analysis would look like in our industry because of everything I just said.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too, Alex, we didn't really talk. I mean, I've sort of mentioned obviously Mrs. Jones as being the avatar that we're ideally trying to attract with our branding, but that is something that we talk a lot about in the book, about the consumer psychology behind branding and how important it is for you to build brands that speak to her. She's the one ultimately making the initial phone call and the initial outreach. So why do so many home service contractors that are owned by men design brands that appeal to them when they're not even the right demographic that the brand is designed to attract, right? So we always want to say, get in the mindset of the people you're selling to and try to figure out what they like, okay? Because they don't like very masculine brands if they're looking to drop 50K on a beautiful outdoor kitchen. Like they're not into that. They're into really, really a much different vibe. So really recognizing that it's not about, if you're a male owner, it's not about what you like as much as it is about what Mrs. Jones likes, because she's the one making the phone call, right? Mm-hmm. So get it out of your mindset that, I got to love my brand if I'm a male. My buddies got to love it. My employees got to love it. They're really not who the brand is designed for. It's that person, and she's likely a woman. She's 45 to 55 years old. She's got 2 kids. There's a BMW in the garage. Like, that's who we're trying to attract, right? And just keeping that in mind as you build a brand is to keep the focus on who you sell to, not necessarily you personally. Now, of course, it'd be stupid to say, I don't want you to like your own brand. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
No, it has to inspire something within you. But
recognize that ultimately she is the one that the brand needs to communicate to first.
Yeah. I was grinning the whole time you were saying that, because I was just remember reading in the chapter that's a funny one. You got these monstrous guys with pipe wrenches, and that's a plumber logo. It's like, it's not what I want in my house.
Exactly.
Hilarious. Yeah. Okay. Let's wrap this up, Dan. I mean, you've given us a ton of great information, but you also have a fantastic business that's offering these services to people, and the book is awesome. I can get it on your website. I can get it on Amazon. Are there any parting words of advice before we sign off here?
I think the one thing that we talk a little bit about in the book, but it's not at the forefront of why people rebrand their companies. But you have to recognize that when you rebrand the company, it's mainly done because the company has evolved over time and no longer represents who you are today. And I think that that's the question. If you're listening to this, give that some serious thought and look at the last project that you just did, and then look at your branding and tell me if it represents what you are capable of. And so many people they bootstrap this, they do the best they can. I completely understand that. But then it's 5 years later or 10 years later, they're doing like super premium high-end work, and yet the brand still looks like it's a startup, or it still looks like, it just doesn't reflect the capabilities of that company. So be introspective. It takes a lot of ego to go back and say, this isn't actually who we are today. But what you find is it re-energizes the owners. They get so enthusiastic about the direction the company is now taking and the new path that they're on. So we always look at it as like this really massive inflection point. It's this catalyst for such positive change. And even what it communicates to the employees is really, really valuable in terms of they see the investment that you're putting into the company, and they get almost re-engaged in the direction of where you want to go. They're energized about it. They're super stoked to get the new swag and to wear the new hat and all those aspects of it. So, that's sort of I don't want to say not intangibles, but that's not why most people rebrand, but that's what happens afterwards. So don't underestimate, the personal aspect of what it means to you as the owner and what it's going to do to your mindset, because it really becomes this amazing sort of catalyst for a rebirth. And it's exciting to see. I love seeing the owners get really excited that they're stoked about the new uniforms and the swag and their first truck that gets wrapped, and it just really changes a lot. And again, like I say in the book, the existing brands are typically like that warm blanket, right? And it's very comfortable. It got you to where you are today. But recognize in a lot of instances, it's actually not going to take you to where you want to go tomorrow.
Fantastic final thought there. So summary here, you got to think about your brand as the hub of a wheel, and every marketing channel, every touch point is a spoke. The stronger your brand, the more effective your marketing is. The more effective your marketing is, the less it'll end up costing you per acquisition over time. That will also help your sales because people are looking for you by name. People looking for you by name will typically be prepared to pay a bit more because they want you. They sought you out of the lot of thousands of other companies out there. Strong brands will also help you with your recruitment efforts, can also help with your retention efforts because like you just said, you got killer swag, you got sick trucks, everything looks good, people look professional, look awesome, they're going to want to stick around. And there's a lot of these intangibles that are very difficult to measure, that's why they're intangible, but they do carry a lot of weight in the hearts and minds of prospective clients, existing clients, former clients, and the same for employees, prospective employees, current employees, and past employees. When they feel proud about where they work or where they worked, that does a lot to propel your brand forward too, because that helps your word of mouth as well. Dan, thank you so much for joining us on the show. If people want to get in touch with you, learn more about your business or fire off some questions, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. I mean, they can go to kickcharge.com and fill out a contact form there. My email is dan@kickcharge.com. And like you said, if they want to get the book, you can get it on Amazon or you could get it on our website as well at kickcharge.com/books.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for joining us this week, Dan. And until next time, everyone, work hard, pave harder, and we'll see you next week on the Hardscape Growth Show.
Thanks, brother.
You've been listening to Hardscape Growth, a podcast for hungry professionals who want to grow their businesses and level up. Each episode is all about taking the next step in running your business, so make sure you never miss a show by subscribing on your favorite podcast player. And if you're finding this information to be useful, help others in your position discover us by giving us a star rating and leaving a comment. We'll see you next week.